out of Jacob. And so then he said, bless, I won't let you go unless you bless me. And he said he called his name Israel rather than Jacob.
And so the name Israel means for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed. And that Israel has struggled. Yeah. For, yeah, a long, long time.
We're going to look a little bit more at that later.
Good.
That's right.
Yeah, you are a stubborn and stiff-necked people.
Then Esau and Jacob reconcile later, which is an amazing story. That Esau is also blessed in some respects, and so he combines, and he like we talked about last week, he marries Ishmael's daughter, and Ishmael has been blessed also. Then Joseph. Who's seen Joseph, an Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat?
Oh yeah.
Some of you have been in it. So if you've seen that, it really tells the story of Joseph very well. And Joseph is envied by his brothers because of dreams that he interprets, and he tells them about it, which I guess he was supposed to do, but it wasn't a really good thing for them at all.
Well, no, like especially the second dream. So you tell them the first dream, you know they don't like it. So you get a second dream that says exactly the same thing, and you also tell them that dream? Like, what sense does that make?
Exactly. And Bob, you were going to say something.
I have a question. Do you know, or is there any realistic estimates of the number of people that were involved? For example, Esau's tribe, he was a tribal leader, and he had a huge army, and Joseph's army, and we're talking about, what, in the total area there, hundreds of thousands?
Well, when he finds him, I think he has 300 men with him.
Who? Esau?
I think Esau had 300 men with him. That doesn't mean they're all of them, but that you kind of get the impression they're just kind of riding around. The boys are just kind of out there riding around and doing what boys like to do, I guess hunting and that sort of thing. Maybe he's still into that, probably. And so that's what's got Jacob so terrified when he has a scout that goes out and sees how many people are with Esau, and now Esau's coming to get him. And what he's coming to do is to reconcile with him. He doesn't know that, though.
But Esau was planning to reconcile with him?
Oh yeah, that's why he wanted to get back with Jacob. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Jacob's offering him all kinds of bribes in that story.
Yeah.
Trying,
That's why I thought that he
Yeah.
was bribing to Esau.
yeah,
But he didn't know. He didn't know.
yeah, and but when the two actually finally meet, Esau, what it says is he fell on Joseph's neck. It's a sign of it's an embrace that's there of gratitude that they're back together, and he's offering him these bribes and things like that's going to be helpful, and Esau basically says, look, I've got all I need and then some. So I don't need that. Yeah.
It's nice too because in chapter 36 it lists the descendants of Esau as well.
So there's Esau, that is Edom, so that's where Esau's, all of those people live, was in the area of Edom.
And that's associated with red, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it said, because he was red.
Yeah.
Because of the red stream.
So Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers, and they were going to kill him, and Reuben stood up for him and said, no, we don't need to be doing that. And who came by and bought Joseph?
Great.
Ishmaelite traders.
Ishmaelite traders. And they took him to Egypt, and he worked as a slave, and
Potiphar's household.
And God was with him. God kept blessing him and caring for him. And that's stated over and over in those chapters. And then he got in trouble through no fault of his own with Potiphar's wife, and was thrown into prison, and then ended up telling the dreams of the Pharaoh what they meant, and what did those dreams mean?
Well, there were two dreams that were the same. One was the 7 fat cows and the 7 lean cows. One was big grain, 7 sheaves of grain, and one was sheaves that were all like terrible. So it was 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine.
And that later happened in Egypt. Okay. Then, so Joseph puts a plan in place to feed people because the famine is going to be coming, and he knows that. And so at the famine, then that precipitates who coming to Egypt?
The brothers.
And the brothers came, and they didn't recognize him.
That's Benjamin.
Except Benjamin, yes, right. And Benjamin was who?
Joseph's brother by Rachel.
Right, the beloved son Benjamin, who Jacob loves very much, the only son left, because Joseph, he believes, is dead. And then Joseph does lots of different things to kind of test his brothers, and eventually then he forgives them. And then Jacob comes to Egypt to live, and all of them come to Egypt to live. And they live in Egypt for about 400 years. Anything else about that story with Joseph? Adam?
The thing that I would say most struck me that I didn't realize before was it specifically says in here that when the 7 years of famine came, the amount that the Egyptians lived off of and sold to the rest of the world, because it was basically a worldwide famine, was 20% of what was
In the time of
the
plenty.
amount they stored up was 20% of the 7 years of plenty.
Right.
And I just thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was wondering if I was reading that right too. If it was the 1/5 that he was asked to store away for Pharaoh. Yeah, I think so.
One little interesting sort of tidbit here is, do you remember what Rachel died from?
Childbirth.
Giving birth to Benjamin.
Yeah.
You know where Rachel was buried?
In Rachel's tomb.
In Rachel's tomb right near Bethlehem.
Bethlehem, yeah.
Right near Bethlehem.
It's still there.
Who was born there later?
Jesus.
Not that late. Still in the Old Testament.
Oh, David, yeah.
Yeah. And then David had a descendant that was born there.
Correct.
Not as famous when he first showed up.
No.
Let's go back to the names of the brothers a little bit, and we're going to come back to it. But sometimes in the New Testament you'll hear about Benjaminites, like I think Paul was a Benjaminite, or Danites, Levites.
Yeah.
So that's where those names come from. All right, let's turn to Genesis 50.
Saul was also a Benjaminite, wasn't he?
Saul.
Or Benjamin? Yeah, Benjamin.
Oh, yes, Saul, yes.
Yeah. No, the king Saul.
King Saul. Maybe that's what I'm thinking
Where did you want us to go?
of. Genesis 50.
Oh, 50.
And would someone else like to read? Genesis 50, 22 to 24. Thank you.
So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's household. And Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were also born of Joseph's knees. Did you want me to continue?
Yeah, one more.
Okay. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely come to you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. So Joseph made the Israelites swear, saying, when God comes to you, you shall carry up my bones from here. And Joseph died, being 110 years old. He was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt.
Now, let's turn the page to Exodus. And when someone read Exodus 1 through 7. What's that?
Talk about a bad beginning to a book. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. The total number of people born to Jacob was 70. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers and that whole generation. But the Israelites were fruitful and prolific. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them.
And God is still blessing the Israelites, but that sets up what's going to happen next week, and them becoming slaves in Egypt.
Quick question.
Yeah,
It says the total number of people born to Jacob was 70.
I think it means the grandchildren.
Oh, okay.
His lineage from him.
Yeah, up to a certain generation. I always question that too, but that's what I read. Is that what you
I
understand?
think that's right.
Yeah. Because he only had those children.
Okay.
We know.
I didn't know there was some side story we didn't know about.
I thought it meant kind of until he died. Like that was the number of kids, grandkids, if there are great grandkids, but whatever, until when he died.
So I just want to talk some about Judah being chosen, talking about a side thing here. So Judah is the fourth born to Jacob. So there are some suppositions about why Judah's chosen. First one being that, and this is also stated some in Genesis 49. Reuben, or actually Simeon and Levi, did something. Actually, let's turn back to 49. If you read all the way through Genesis, you know what they did. If you didn't, you could read that. But Reuben was disqualified because he was with Jacob's concubine. Simeon and Levi killed some people in a I won't tell you how. If you want to read about it, that'd be fine. And then Judah, the fourth one, it talks a lot about Judah there from verses 8 through 12. That's one supposition. Another one is that, and that's probably what's going on, definitely. But then there also are the reversals. There's Cain and Abel. There's Ishmael and Isaac. There's Esau and Jacob. There's Tamar's sons, Zerah and Perez. So Tamar's the daughter-in-law of Judah, actually. Let's go to Genesis 38. And Genesis 38, and I'll read this.
Oh dear. Yeah.
So Tamar is pregnant, and when the time of her delivery came, there were twins in her womb. Again, twins. While she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and bound on his hand a crimson thread, saying, "This one came out first." But just then he drew back his hand, and out came his brother. And she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." Therefore he was named Perez. Afterward, his brother came out with a crimson thread on his hand, and he was named Zerah. There's another reversal there, and Perez is in the lineage. And then Manasseh, Joseph had two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh is the oldest. Does anybody remember the story of Manasseh and Ephraim?
I think the youngest gets the blessing more than.
The youngest gets the blessing through Jacob, and he reverses his hands. So Joseph brings up his boys, and Jacob goes to bless, and so Ephraim got the blessing. And then a third supposition that I read about that I found very interesting is when Leah is giving birth in Genesis 29, she gives birth to, let's see, a lot of children. 29, starting in verse 32. Leah conceived and bore a son, and she named him Reuben, for she said, "Because the Lord has lifted my affliction, surely now my husband will love me." Then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, "Because the Lord has heard that I'm hated, he has given me this son also," and she named him Simeon. Again she conceived and bore a son, and said, "Now this time my husband will be joined to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore he was named Levi. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, "This time I will praise the Lord." Therefore she named him Judah. And then she ceased bearing. What's the difference?
It wasn't all about her.
She turned to look the Lord. Yeah. So that was another thing I read, which was interesting.
And then that one was Judah, the one.
Right, that was Judah.
And then one of the things I hadn't noticed before, but I noticed when we were going through the readings last night, was Judah specific. Reuben had a plan to go get Jacob out of the pit, or to go get Joseph out of the pit, but Judah was the one specifically who came up with the bright idea of, hey, let's not kill him, let's sell him to Ishmaelite traders instead.
And later, Judah is the one that was going to be the sacrificial brother to stand in for Benjamin. Both Joseph and Mary trace bloodlines through Judah. Joseph traces his bloodline through Solomon, son of David, and Mary is through Nathan, another son of David. So that's interesting. Joseph, Mary's husband. And then cousins, Elizabeth and Mary, it talks about them being cousins or related to each other. And Elizabeth is a Levite, and Mary is from Judah, from the line of Judah. They must have been related through their mothers in some way. And then Micah 5:2. This is a prophecy of the Messiah.
Micah.
Go to Micah. And then Habakkuk. In Micah 5:2 it says, "For you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, who are one of the little clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origin is from of old, from ancient days." And again, that's repeated in Matthew 2 when the wise men are looking for Jesus. Matthew 2:6. Just quotes that. I guess the takeaways that we have from this stories is that the people in the Bible are not always doing good things at all. But that doesn't mean we're supposed to emulate them. But we learn from them that God still loves us. He loved them. God loves us. and he does not break his promises with them or with us, and he continues the relationship. It's also going to talk about Joseph and dreams, but were you going to talk about that?
Not very much.
Okay. So on the looking ahead, let's just look at that. Pastors preached about this a few times, and it's very interesting that the Joseph in the Old Testament was an interpreter of dreams. And also Joseph, Mary's husband, is getting messages from the Lord through dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So on your sheet there, Matthew 1:20. And when somebody finds that, would you just read it? It's just one passage. So many of you are good readers.
But as he considered this, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary your wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins.
Thank you. And then Matthew 2:13.
Oh, okay. I think I found it. Yeah. Okay. Now, after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. Then Joseph got up and took the child and his mother by night and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Out of Egypt I had called my son.
The movement kind of goes from Canaan to Egypt, Egypt to Canaan. There's just a lot of movement and action. And then chapter 2, 19 to 21.
I will.
Thank you.
When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, Get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who are seeking the child's life are dead. Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. After being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene.
I'm glad you read farther. He will be called a Nazarene.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good. That was Jesus. But
Talking about Nazareth there, it's if you haven't been to the Holy Land, and I know probably most of you haven't, it's kind of a striking experience to see where these things are. And you visualize things, and then you see the actual locations, and sometimes it's very different than what you visualize. In the case of Nazareth, it's up pretty high and kind of over above the heights that come up from the Sea of Galilee. But from there, it's not too far before you can come across that area there and then be looking down on the Sea of Galilee. At the time, Caesarea was under construction. And this is something there's absolutely no proof of, but you wonder if a construction worker like Joseph, whose name is Tekton, which is usually translated as carpenter, really means a craftsman, a person who works with his hands. So there's also a real good chance that he was a stonemason, because a lot of residences were built of stone in those days. And if he needed to work, it was not very far for him to get to Caesarea. That was a big construction zone, but not a place where Jews were supposed to go, because it was totally Gentile. And Herod was building that city to honor the emperor, the Roman emperor. So that's just totally speculation, but that's, you wonder, and Jesus is the son of a tecton. So you wonder, some say, when you picture Jesus, you probably think of someone that's a carpenter, but if you think of him as being a stonemason, maybe you can understand better why he could pass through a group of people and want to put him to death, which is what happens in Nazareth. He was maybe a pretty physically imposing sort of person. We don't know, but stonemasons tend to be pretty muscular characters. We don't know. It's just kind of interesting way to think about those possibilities. One of the things early on that I thought about, do you know, if you look at all the towns and the locations that are in the Bible, do you know what modern nation has more of those than any other? Turkey.
No, Turkey. Wow.
Yeah, it's over 40% of all the places that are named in the Bible are in modern day Turkey.
Okay, that like includes the 7 churches too.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the eastern part of Turkey, right?
Mhm.
Not on the east side of the Straits of Bosphorus.
Some of the west.
Yeah, it's in Turkey, you're by biblical places, just about any place you are in Turkey. But the one time that I've been there, because of what was going on with Syria, because that's on that eastern border, tourists weren't going there much at all. And I remember asking our guide, are we seeing all these places that are kind of central and west in Turkey? Are there as many in the east? And he said, oh yeah, there's many, and they're as great to see as these are. And you can, as a tour guide, if you're willing to do tours now in eastern Turkey, you can make a whole lot of money. He said, because most tour guides don't want to be going that close to Syria. And he said, and I'm one of them. He said, I wouldn't go there. You might not come back.
Perhaps it's no accident then that, Turkey possessing all of these biblically named and biblically relevant cities that, that was also where Constantinople was, which was how a lot of Christianity got spread out of Rome because it was the official religion of the Roman Empire at that time, eventually.
Yeah.
And Cappadocia, that's mentioned in Acts 2, that also has the stone chimneys that are interesting. But that is very close to Haran, and it's also a city where there are tunnels, and because of the rock formations, and where Christians were hiding during those times too.
Well, there are just 2 passages that we've touched on these some, but I wanted to point out. One is in Genesis 28. We talked some things about the first verses there, and that was one of the texts listed, but right after that comes this. Jacob left 28:10, and I'm going to go through 22. The first part I'm going to go through kind of fast because it gets more to the point of what I want to point out here a little later. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones in the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. He dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. And your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Now that's going back to the promise that was made, of course, to Abraham. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Okay, the reason that Jacob is leaving then is because he's fleeing Esau at the time. Rebekah hears that Esau is saying, when Father Isaac dies, I'm after him tricking my father to get the blessing, I'm so angry at him, I'm going to kill him. And Esau seemed to express this in a loud enough way that word got back to Rebekah that Esau was planning to kill Jacob. And of course, Jacob was Rebekah's favorite, so she said, we got to get a wife for you, and we don't want to be anybody from around here, so you go stay, you go where we've got family. And that's when he goes to Laban. So this is, and him making the trek to escape from Esau. And Jacob wakes from his sleep, said, and this place gets the name Bethel because of this story. But in verse 25, that's where it says that. We're in chapter 28, and verse 19. He, that is Jacob, called that place Bethel. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, now listen to this vow that Jacob makes. And the first word here is very key. If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then, here's the if then, the Lord shall be my God. And this stone on which I've set up a pillar shall be God's house. And all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you. So it's an if-then deal. If God will take care of him, basically, always, then the Lord shall be my God. And I'll even tithe. So, Jacob's faith here seems to be dependent on a pretty conditional thing. God, you need to do all these things for me. Well, Lois talked about a lot of things. So let's jump to what does Jacob realize God's told him to do after all the things that have happened with honest Uncle Laban and all the ways that God's blessed Jacob there, is he goes home to try to get reconciled with Esau. God tells him to do that. So this is in Genesis 32, 3 through 12. Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob. Look at the way he's framing this. I have lived with Laban as an alien and stayed until now, and I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, males and female slaves, and I have sent to tell my lord, you Esau, in order that I may find favor in your sight. The messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he's coming to meet you with 400 men are with him. I guess 300 earlier. He's got 400 with him, and it's possible. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that were with him in flocks and herds and camels into 2 companies, thinking if Esau comes to the one company and destroys it, then the company that is left will escape. And now listen to Jacob, after all he's been through. Verse 9. Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, and I will do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all the steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, please, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I am afraid of him. He may come and kill us all, the mothers with the children. Yet you have said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted because of their number. And then jumping ahead to verses 24 through 30. But let's not jump there. O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country, and so on. I'm not worthy of the least of all the steadfast love that you've shown me. The Lord has fulfilled all the things that Jacob put there in that if-then conditional. If this, if that, then you'll be my God. At this point, oh God, my God. Yeah.
Looking at the Bible as the greatest story ever told, which it is, that's what I call character development.
Yeah.
Also see that when times are good, oh yeah, you know, if then, when times are bad, I need you, I trust you.
And that's the night. It's before the reconciliation that happens with Esau, that there's a story that we talked about about Jacob was alone. This is verse 24, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel." For, what does Israel mean? You've striven with God and with humans, and have prevailed. Israel, one translation that El is the short for the Elohim. Wrestles with God. You wrestled with God. And then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why did you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." You remember who saw God but didn't see God face to face?
Moses.
Yeah.
That
The
was my-
Lord said to Moses, "If you see my face, you'll just be consumed. It's just too overwhelming." So he shows him his backside. and we talked about this maybe, that Michelangelo's depiction on the top of the Sistine Chapel is God going by showing his backside. To Moses.
So that was a question I sort of asked last time. So if you saw God and lived, was this God the Father, or was this God the Son? Was that actually Jesus?
Well, Jacob called that place that. Jacob thought he had seen God face to face, and yet his life was preserved.
But Jesus is God. So. And,
Yeah.
And Moses said you can't see God's face and live. So, I mean,
Did maybe Jacob get it wrong? I don't know the answer to that.
I
really don't.
I don't think he did. But just he may not have seen God the Father, but he seen God the Son.
But God can do what God can do.
Yeah. It's a fascinating story. I mean, how can there be a man that wrestles with God and God just can't get away? But as I think was brought up a little bit earlier, I know it was brought up a little bit earlier, that sure sounds like the story of Israel, the people of Israel, wrestling with God. That seems to still be continuing. All right, well, we just have about 5 minutes to our time's up. Yeah.
You know, in your life, you run into the Bible in various aspects constantly. Not too many years ago, I was asked to help build a Jacob's ladder, which is a device used in theater, and it's 2 bars straight up and down, and powered and it's static electricity goes across from one to the other. You can see it, and it runs up and it runs down, and they call that a Jacob's ladder. They use it in various scenes in theater.
That was a favorite science fair project when I was in junior high school.
So you made one?
No, I never did, but I saw them from people that were good at science fair projects.
Oh, okay.
And then it'd be two wires,
Yeah.
and it would go zzz, and it was just kind of scary.
Yeah.
And there's the song Jacob's Ladder, but the only problem with the song is that it works righteousness. We are climbing Jacob's ladder, we're getting closer to God,
Yeah.
which, you know,
Yeah.
that's not true.
That wasn't written by Luther.
No.
Reminds me a little too much of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah. A lot of
Question. Esau, Jacob stole the birthright, and all he got was the blessing. Is the birthright a blessing? Is that what's passed on? Is that what is hoped for by the son and everything? Is there anything else but a blessing involved?
Well,
Physical.
a few things. One that it says at the end of that story of Esau selling it for a bowl of soup because he's so hungry, is when you got the birthright, when you're the firstborn, you've got honor in the community, and you have some authority that only the firstborn has. For one thing, quite often inheritances went to one child. It was the oldest son, no matter how many children were born. It wasn't divided up.
Still does. Still does in some societies.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's one thing. It's despising something that's given to you at birth, which in that sense it's really seen as a gift from God. And you know, keep the birthright or get a bowl of soup when I'm hungry. I'll take the soup. You know, that says some things that really aren't too complimentary about Esau. So that's kind of offensive to God, I suppose, is part of what's going on there. And the thing about a blessing, you remember what Jacob says to Esau when he realizes that they've been schnookered. What he says, and Esau comes in and he's very upset, and he says, "Give me the blessing, Father. Give me the blessing." Do you remember what he says? "I can't. I've already given it away to your brother. I can't draw those words back." The belief there was that when that word goes forth, when that blessing goes forth, you can't retract that. That's given. Jacob had it.
And that's the same thing with Joseph too, from Manasseh, he couldn't take it back, whatever he did.
So
But if you're duped, I mean, can't you say, "Hey, I was duped," you know?
that's just what he said. And he was told, no, I can't. Yeah, we got duped here, but that word's been spoken. I can't pull that back. I don't know if that's as good as said.
Why is there only one blessing?
Well, he does give him a blessing.
Yeah.
He does, but it's
Different.
yeah, it doesn't have all the power and all the majesty of what he's just given to Jacob. And so he does give that. And the thing that's kind of nice in that story of Esau is he realizes before he gets back to Jacob, probably some time before he gets back together with Jacob, he's so excited that he's going to get to finally see this brother, is that he's been blessed very, very much by God. Esau has, not just Jacob. And he's grateful for that. And he's grateful to have his brother back and reconciled. And you know, that makes us think too of brothers that we don't hear the end of the story, but it doesn't look real hopeful for them getting reconciled in the parable of the prodigal son. You know, that ends with that older brother standing outside, furious because the father has blessed the younger one that's been the scoundrel. And And he says, how can I not celebrate? The lost one's coming back. He has come back. And of course, the older brother in there, it's very clear exactly who he represents, and that's the scribes and the Pharisees who are so upset at Jesus because he cares for those younger brother types, those ones that are lost, those that run off, they're on the fringes of society, that sort of thing. He eats meals with tax collectors and prostitutes. And Jesus, when people are upset about that, one of the things he says, I didn't come for the healthy people, I came for the sick ones. God loves them too. I came to save the lost, and there are plenty around. You got the law. You understand what this is about, or you're supposed to. Thank God for that. Don't be jealous of those that are lost, but those are the ones that God's chosen to go to.
Isn't part of the blessing too the progeny, or a progeny part of the blessing also?
Yes. Yeah. In that culture, very much. You want to say more about that?
Oh, just that progeny are part of the blessing too. Children and grandchildren. Because children in those days were, having children was huge to the culture.
And in that culture, how do you how do you live on?
Your children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your children pretty much the only.
Yeah, that's how you continue to live in Old Testament times. That's how you have a future, because you hand on blessings to them who hand on blessings to the next generation, and so on. So that's why when we hear about Old Testament characters, women that have infertility problems, how that is such a shame. And it's also thought of, if God loved me, I'd have children. And that's not happening. So Hannah, wonderfully faithful woman, but she's not having children. And finally just is so persistent that I think God finally says, I've heard enough from her.
Okay, you win.
So then the birth of Samuel happens. She's got the other wife, Penina, yeah, it's having child after child after child, and that's not the favorite wife. It's the one that can't have a child. It's the favorite wife.
Same thing, Rachel and Leah. Leah has 4 and then 2 later.
Yeah.
And Rachel winds up with 2 finally.
Yeah.
In that culture, women were not blessed except through their husband.
And their
And their
babies.
children.
Yeah, it's a fertile woman was a sign of God's favor. I'm glad we're not living in that time.
I have a real quick question. It says Zebulun he's talking about his sons. It says Zebulun shall settle at the shores of the sea. He shall be a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Zidon. Where did the Phoenicians come from? That lived in that area?
I don't know.
Okay, just curious, because that sort of sounds like that. The Phoenicians were their ship. They lived in Tyre and Sidon.
I'm not sure. Well, it's getting too close to 11 for us to continue without getting in trouble. So, the Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Lord, keep teaching us through your word. Keep drawing us together. Bless people returning from vacation time away, that they might have safe travels. And thank you for using us to do your work in this world. Keep us returning to you and looking for more direction and forgiveness when we fail you. And thank you for your gracious mercy that carries us each day. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So you're gonna get in trouble, it's not like Joe Biden. I'm gonna get in trouble.